Now, honestly, I thought that Milo had said things that would destroy the irony meter before, until I actually read his article about protecting paedophiles, which it sets new levels for this sort of thing. And for those of you instantly reaching for the dislike button, let me just read you a little bit from Milo's article. Acceptance and relativism are essential tools of the partisan left, which abandons all sense of moral consistency when one of its own is accused. So yeah, if you're reaching for the dislike button before you've even heard the case, then that's exactly what you've become. You've entered the land where facts just don't affect your opinion anymore. So let me read you some more of Milo's article. So, the article's titled, "Here's Why the Progressive Left Keeps Sticking Up for Paedophiles," shared 33,000 times by Milo, and it's got a picture of Jimmy Savile here. Jimmy Savile was a serial sexual predator who predated on people from young to old. And his serial sexual abuse went on for so long because people who knew about it kept silent about it.
I don't want to be indiscreet about specific people.
Right, you don't have to do that.
It's going
just dance
to be,
around the facts.
Yeah, dangerous. But I can tell you the truth without dropping anyone in it.
Okay.
I mean, some of the boys there were very young. Very young.
Now, it's odd that when Milo was looking at other people, he could see this sort of behaviour as very wrong. As he says in his article on Breitbart. In other words, progressives got all fired up whether green and purple was a rapey colour scheme, was suddenly fine with the discussion of incestuous paedophilia from a 22-year-old in a chat room full of teenagers.
But we're talking about 1325, 1328. These things do happen perfectly consensually.
And you thought it was appropriate to walk into the home of a 14-year-old boy who you thought was alone, buck naked. What was your plan?
I don't know, sir.
It's been a somewhat grotesque spectacle to watch. But these two incidents are merely the latest in a disturbing trend of paedophilia activism on the left, which has gone out on a limb time and time again to normalise child abuse. Well, Milo, if this isn't normalising child abuse, I don't know what is. Unless you're going to go out there and say a 25-year-old having a relationship with a 13-year-old isn't child abuse. So yeah, by Milo's own standards, this is now, he and those who support him are now paedophilia activists on the right. Now bear in mind, this is just judging him by the standards by which he judged others. Milo later goes on to say, paedophilia itself is of course not confined to one side of the political spectrum, but defending it does seem to be. Well, evidently not, Milo, as there has been massive support for you even after your comments about how you can have a consensual relationship between a 13-year-old and a 25-year-old. Yet incredibly, Salon is by no means alone. In the aftermath of the Jimmy Savile scandal in the UK, The Guardian published a feature carrying the disturbing claim that there's not even a full academic consensus on whether consensual paedophilic relationships necessarily cause harm.
The point about all this stuff is we get hung up on abuse. This is a controversial point of view I accept, but we get hung up on this this sort of child abuse stuff. And to the point where we're heavily policing even relationships between consenting adults, sort of grad students and professors at universities.
And why would you at 30 think it would be okay to hang out with a 13-year-old girl home alone?
This arbitrary and oppressive idea of consent, which totally destroys, the understanding that many of us have of the complexities and subtleties and complicated nature of many relationships.
You tried to solicit a 13-year-old girl online using graphic sexual language. What do you think should happen to you?
Sir, I'm not like that.
But we're talking about 1325, 1328. These things do happen perfectly consensually.
Well, bugger me, if that isn't Milo advocating for the exact same behaviour that he was so quick to condemn when it was coming from the progressive left. And as for all of you out there supporting Milo because he's one of your own, well, Milo's got some words of comfort for you too. Acceptance and relativism are essential tools of the partisan left. And now, thanks to Milo, we can see that they're essential part of the partisan right too, which abandons all sense of moral consistency when one of its own is accused. And yes, by Milo's own standards, those of you who are supporting him are enabling the abuse of children, as he explicitly states. You know, it's a bit like how the BBC covered up for Savile for all those years. Aggressive public displays of virtue are where the morally deplorable hide. What, you mean like this aggressive display of public virtue?
I would like to restate my disgust at adults who sexually abuse minors. I'm horrified by pedophilia. I've repeatedly expressed disgust at pedophilia in my feature and opinion writing.
Milo goes on to say, whether by cleansing progressives of sin through virtue signaling. Yeah, virtue signaling. Like this.
I have devoted large portions of my career to exposing child abuse. I'm implacably opposed to the normalization of pedophilia, and I will continue to report and speak accordingly. To repeat, I do not support child abuse.
And if you think any of this is harsh, let me just remind you, this is exactly Milo Yiannopoulos' article. Or simply by enabling them to hide in plain sight, slacktivism provides a welcoming environment for scammers and the unsavory, which is why progressives protect their own. Oh really, Milo? I mean, let's be real. If this had been Sarkeesian who had been found out to say these sorts of things, she would have been burned alive without appeal. But because it's Milo, because it's one of your own, you defend him, even though he says that the sort of defense that you're doing for him is absolutely distasteful, that it's what allows people like this to hide in plain sight. You are enabling this sort of behavior. Which brings us on to one of the most distasteful defenses that people have used for Milo Yiannopoulos. That he couldn't do anything because it would have required personal risk on his part. You know, to do the right thing, to do the virtuous thing, rather than just virtue signalling the controversial position that he thinks that child abuse is bad.
And,
Did you go to one of his parties?
I went to other people who I won't name of a similar stature in Hollywood. I went to their boat parties and to their house parties and things, and some of the things I have seen have beggared belief. I don't want to be indiscreet about specific people.
Right, you don't have to
because
do
I think
that.
it's going
Just dance
to be,
around the facts.
Yeah, dangerous. But I can tell you the truth without dropping anyone in it.
Okay.
I mean, some of the boys there were very young. Very young.
And anyone who suggests, however, that I turn a blind eye to illegal activity or to the abuse of minors is unequivocally wrong.
Do you think that's what's going on with that guy who directed X-Men? Bunch of
Bryan Singer?
Yeah, a bunch of 14-year-old predators going after that poor man.
I'm not sure it's the case with him, whether I ever met Bryan Singer or whether I even knew who he was then. But I knew other people of similar stature, as I say, and there were some very young boys around at that time.
So he strongly implies here that he went to parties where he witnessed the abuse of minors, but did nothing. Why? He might have got sued for it. It might have hurt his career. So he's more one of those people who fights paedophilia by virtue signalling, rather than actually doing anything about it. Not in a way that actually when he actually sees it in front of him, he reports it to the police or something. That is Milo, and those who are defending him have become exactly the core who normalize the abuse of minors that Milo was so strong and clear to condemn when other people were doing it. Yeah, and it would be a damn sight easier to cut the guy a little more slack at this point had he not written such a fire and brimstone article burning others alive for doing exactly what he's done himself.